Welcome to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. Hi, I'm David Manti, and welcome to a new episode of the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. With me today is Socrates Rosenfeld, CEO and co-founder of Jane Technologies. Thank you very much for joining me today, Socrates.
Thank you, David. Thanks for having me on, man. It's a pleasure.
Absolutely. And before we get started, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at david@cannabisequipmentnews.com with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. Socrates, I want to start first by saying the best name of anybody I've ever had on the podcast. That is a strong name.
It is a strong name. People tell me that often, and I should just give my mom's email address and just be like, hey, hit my mom up, because she was a 21-year-old relatively single mother. And the story, just 30 seconds on that, everybody thinks I was named after the great philosopher. I was actually named after the Brazilian soccer player Socrates. In 1982, really? He was the captain of the Brazilian soccer team that won the World Cup. And so the story goes, I don't know if it's true, if you know my mom, that she heard the name Socrates on the TV as she was in her last trimester, and fell in love with the name and the person, I think, and named me after him. So, well, I'll take it, man. I'll take it.
Yeah, well done, and please pass it along to your mother.
I will. Shout out, Kenny.
So, growing up with a somewhat single mother, how did that lead to joining the Army and then eventually your path into MIT?
Man, that's a great question. And if you had asked me at the time, I would have given you the exact same answer. And that's really, I don't know. Other than I think subconsciously I was seeking validation. I was seeking approval. You know, as much as I wish I could say I joined West Point because in the spirit of patriotism and serving my country, that was maybe a little bit of it. But I was 18 and I knew I didn't have money for college. So I was actually going to join the Marines, was my other option. And there was a wrestling coach at West Point who saw something in me. His name's Todd Giles. He's no longer here. And brought me up for a visit, and I remember visiting the campus, and it was a beautiful campus from the outside looking in. And I saw these, young adults acting so professional, and I was like, that's what I want to do. And man, I had no idea what I was signing up for, David. It was a bumpy ride. I'll just say that.
Did you wrestle for Army?
I had a cup of coffee on the Army wrestling team. You're in Wisconsin. I remember some good wrestlers out of Wisconsin, Portage, Wisconsin specifically. But I remember getting into the room. I was okay in high school, and I'm wrestling with a bunch of other D1 wrestlers from Midwest, California. And it was pretty quickly that I realized all right, I have no business being here. And I struggled at West Point. I really did. I was untethered. I had no guidance. You would think I would have structure, but I fought against that structure, and I made my time at West Point really, really difficult because I think I didn't make peace with why I went. So I was trying to figure that out on my own, and I graduated by the skin of my teeth, and that's really when I started to appreciate the privilege of leading. The privilege of serving others was during my time in the armies. I flew Apache helicopters, but yeah, during that time it was pretty formative in terms of shaping me as a leader.
Was it like an anti-authoritarian sort of pushback?
I love this. It was. So it's good, man. If you want to get into it, I love it. So when you're kind of in that environment, one of the cool parts about the military is it removes your ego. Right, everybody does ayahuasca to remove their ego these days. I joke and say, just join the Army. They'll give you a number. They'll shave your head. They won't refer to you by your name. And they do that by design because you realize you're part of something bigger than yourself, which is actually beautiful, right? You give yourself to the community. Unfortunately, what they don't tell you, or what they don't teach you, is that you could build yourself up in your own form, how you want. And that's why a lot of veterans struggle, is they'll tell you, hey, you're a captain, you're an Apache pilot, you're a Ranger. You literally wear it on your chest. And then when you get out, all that stuff goes away. And then you forget, like, okay, who am I? Because the Army told me who I was. And so I think during that time at West Point, those first 4 years, remember back when you're 18, you're rebellious as it is, you're losing your sense of innocence and you're kind of stepping into the adult world. We'll multiply that by like 100 at West Point. And I didn't know what to do, but I was fighting losing myself. And I took it out on the authorities there. And really, they took it out on me, because the system doesn't work that way. And I really struggled with that. And so I'm learning more and more now that I'm 40, 41, to surrender to the experience, and I don't have to lose myself. And I could be a part of it. I could be in it, just not of it, if that makes any sense. And I wasn't mature enough. I didn't get the guidance really to realize, like, oh man, you could be at West Point and not lose who you are. And I didn't realize that at the time. So I was very scared. So I fought against that. And I fought the law, and the law won many times during my time at West Point.
I can relate to that statement. But I feel that a lot of times people that kind of, wind up being anti-authoritarian or fighting against leadership is because they have more of a natural sense of being a natural leader themselves. And so instead of like what you could learn from good leaders and, bring into your own leadership, it's just like, no, I could definitely do this better.
Right. Yeah, man. Oh man. And it sounds crazy to kind of say that at the age of 18, 19. But what I fought against was the dogma. I don't like I'll bring this back to cannabis. But they had many rules at West Point, right? So arbitrary, like not nonsense, in my opinion. You got to wear your sideburns a certain way. I understand why they do that. It's by design. But I think you run the risk of not seeing the forest amongst the trees. Like you pay attention more to the dogma or to the rule, and you forget why the rule exists. It's to point you into a direction of truth, hopefully, right? That's the kind of the letter of the law. And so here, I really struggled with what I consider to be BS. I was like, cool, it doesn't matter how well I shine my shoes. This is what I was thinking at the time as an immature 19-year-old kid. That doesn't affect the way I'm going to lead people. And at West Point, some folks got lost in that because they were also 19, trying to do the best they could and follow the rules. And here, though, as an entrepreneur, when I started Jane, I was like, cool, there are rules out there. There are laws, but then there's truth. And I'm following truth. And I'm not going to put myself in a position where, most laws out there, I don't know, most laws. Some laws out there are really good, right? Like, don't take life, don't take advantage of people who can't defend themselves. All those things make sense. But the truth is there. It's like, hey, protect life, don't be an asshole. But in cannabis, there were all these rules. You can't sell cannabis, you can't do stuff in this industry. And it wasn't until I tried cannabis for the first time in my life that I said, all right, man, these rules can be broken because I'm chasing after truth. And we want to build this business to go in and shine light on the truth. And it's a lot easier now as a 41-year-old entrepreneur than it was as an 18-year-old cadet at West Point. But this, I think that the principle still applies, and that's, the laws and the rules we make as human beings should be intended to surface the truth and protect the truth, rather than kind of get lost in the dogma and forget about the truth altogether. You have literally people in prison in your state, right? In Wisconsin.
Oh yeah.
Or shit, in Illinois, in Massachusetts, in other states, California, non-criminal cannabis offenses, and literally in the same jurisdiction, people are making money off it because we can't just shine light on the truth. We have to follow rules as human beings. And yeah, that was a little frustrating for me growing up. And now I like this position a lot better.
How long did you serve? And then Did you go to MIT sort of trying to find yourself?
Yeah, wow. It's a great podcast already, man. I think we're going to talk about like cannabis equipment, and it would be a very short podcast, man, because I don't have a lot of expertise in that. But I served in the Army active duty for about 7, 8 years. I had done some, like looking back, some pretty like crazy things. Flying Apache helicopter. People ask me all the time now. They're like, "Oh, would you fly that again?" And I'm like, "Absolutely not." Like thinking about it now is terrifying. I struggle driving at night now. So I've made every Apache helicopter pilot just shake their head, be like, "Man, we have a reputation to maintain to be cool." I deployed to Iraq. I went to Ranger School. I served as platoon leader, company commander, and I got to learn about real leadership that transcends rules. And it's crazy to learn that in the military, where rules dictate everything, but you realize the real sauce, the real it, is outside of the rules. It's human to human connection and love. If you boil it down to it, it's really love. We don't like to say that in the Army. But I like to say it now. And then I got out. I was 29 years old. I had applied to Harvard Business School because I thought that was the only business school that existed in the world. Like literally, I was like, oh, I guess business school is Harvard Business School. I obviously didn't get in because they were smart not to let me in. If you knew my GPA at West Point, it'd be understandable. So I had this year, David, where I was like untethered, and it was terrifying. I didn't know who I was. I had a wonderful wife. I had a family. I had a roof over my head. I had all this agency relative to other veterans who don't have that, and I was still feeling stuck. So I couldn't imagine what it would be like to come home to an empty house as a veteran. And my heart goes out to those folks. And there was something inside of me that knew that I didn't want to go right into another job. And I needed some space. And one of the beautiful things that the Army does provide for you is this GI Bill that pays for school, a large part of it. And my brother at the time was going to MIT as an engineer. He's a brilliant, brilliant dude. And I was like, oh, MIT has a business school? Well, I'll just go to MIT. And I want to I remember thinking at the time, I want to start a company with my brother. And man, not literally, but figuratively, I snuck in the back door there. And I'm so grateful to that institution, not only for the academics that it provided me in the network and professors that I learned from, but man, those 2 years as a student to really come back to myself in a really protected, safe space was everything. And so any veteran listening to that, like if you can get some space before you transition to your next thing, because in the military, you're always on to the next. If you can just take a breath and come back to yourself, come back home to your heart, man, that made all the difference. And that was the first time I tried cannabis, David, and it changed my life. There's like 29 before, and then after that moment, really almost a different human being, or just an evolution of myself, which is beautiful. And I'm forever grateful for all the experiences, West Point, Army, but specifically those 2 years at MIT. I would say I think the story would have been different if I didn't have that time.
What was the first time experimenting with cannabis like?
Oh, man. So my brother had consumed cannabis. I remember at one point I was yelling at him, but I was giving him a stern conversation at an Outback Steakhouse. He was 15 years old. I was in the Army. And he told me, hey, I smoke weed. And I was like, how could you do this? Oh my God, you're throwing your life away. All those things that I had been told. And that was it. We didn't talk about it after that. I came back home, and man, if you know me now, you probably consider me intense. Like back then, I was very, very intense. I was angry, very angry guy. And my it was kind of like a joke of like, oh, cool. Hey, Sock, you should smoke some weed. Calm down. I was like, I don't need that. And I tried different things and nothing was calming me down. I couldn't find my balance again. I couldn't find myself again. And I had another friend, Ben Green, who ended up being a co-founder, by the way, who is a co-founder of the company. So is Abe, was in the room, and he had brought over a quarter ounce of cannabis. I'll never forget. And this was going to be the day that Sock was going to try it. And everybody's like, oh my God, is this really going to happen? I'm sure we all have people like that in our lives. Like, oh man, I would love to see this person smoke some weed. And I remember we rolled blunts, talk about a first time experience. And I was so tight, David. I had such a hard shell. I just did not allow myself to feel the feelings of being high. And it took me 7 blunts. And we smoked the entire quarter ounce. And I will, you want to know about what kind of guy Ben Green is. That's the kind of friend he was. And I remember finally feeling it. And I was lying down, listening to the Allman Brothers with a grape Jolly Rancher in my mouth. And I had this feeling, this foreign feeling that I hadn't felt in a very long time. I remember just lying there, my eyes closed, and being like, what is this feeling? And it was joy. It was bliss. It was peace. And I remember being like, this image of being like a 7-year-old kid riding my bike on a summer day by myself. It got me back there to that feeling. And I remember from that moment, I was like, all of this stuff that I was told about this plant was a lie. And that started my journey in the pursuit of truth, first about the plant and then about myself. And so now I don't really take on face value what people tell me as just the, gospel and the truth. I really try to own the truth for myself. And that moment really put me back on course of the truth. And it brought me a sense of balance that I couldn't replicate. And from there, I was able to rest and find pockets of joy in my life and take care of myself and then love others. And I think people mistake the plant as a panacea or any plant medicine, mushrooms, psychedelics, like, oh, if you take this, you're healed. And it's actually, in my experience, not the case. If you take it, it opens your heart to begin the healing process without fear, with love, with grace, with self-empathy and non-judgment. That's what the plant allowed me to do. And I'm really grateful that I was able to connect with the plant at the age and time in my life that I did, because I think if I did that when I was 15, 16, man, I was messed up at that age, and I would have probably abused it, and I wouldn't have the same relationship as I do now with the plant. I'm grateful that everything worked out as it always does, the way it's meant to.
So from that first experience, combined with your education at MIT, as you're on this pursuit for truth, what does that look like, and how does that evolve into a career in cannabis?
Man, it's I remember thinking to myself, you're MIT and you read all these cases of companies, of just human beings that built these amazing companies and created things in this world that help people. Most of the time, sometimes you're like, man, that what you created didn't help people, but you learn that it's possible. I think that's the biggest thing that these institutions provide for their students. It's like, you go to Harvard, you just walk down the hallways, you're like, oh man, shit's possible here. Like, we could do that. MIT, same thing. So it was like I was in that energy. And I remember thinking to myself, man, what a dream come true it would be to start this company with my brother. And I shifted out to Silicon Valley after graduating. I didn't have any idea, and I was a consultant. And I remember convincing myself that I didn't have what it took to be a CEO in a tech company, because I'm not an engineer. if you watch me do math, you'd be like, wow, this guy really is not an engineer. But I was watching these CEOs. I was able to be in the room with them as a consultant of these tech companies. I was like, man, they're just human beings too. And really at the same time, David, I had this idea where I was studying for McKinsey about all these marketplaces and how you shop online. And I was like, man, why can't we do that for cannabis? Because as a consumer in California, I had no idea how to shop for cannabis. I would just like find some random store on Weed Maps, drive there, and like, hey man, what should I get? But here there was an opportunity to understand. If you think about everything you order online, you have the full purchasing power as the consumer. You get ratings, reviews, compare by price, etc. And I was like, man, can we do this? I remember asking Abe, my brother, and he's like, yeah, man, we can actually do this. This is a good idea. And he had a set of skills in terms of kind of systems integration and data warehousing that was exceptional. He's a brilliant mind. And alongside Ben, who gave me my first blunt, Howard and Simon, we started this business. And that was in 2016, 2017, we launched the business. And we haven't looked back since. And to your point about keeping the truth, protecting the integrity of the plant, not commoditizing the plant, not saying it's all the same, not all about like getting high, but it's about getting well. Like that's where we try to use our influence as a tech company. We're not the loudest voice in the room, but really can we serve as the platform to promote truth and allow brands to speak to their consumer base, to allow retailers to showcase their inventory in a really truthful way? Because ultimately that's all we're looking for. And I think that's how you build a foundation for an industry to grow for generations, rather than kind of chasing the next flashy thing or the celebrity brand. And nothing against those brands, but there's got to be something deeper there. And we cannot forget why this plant exists, and that's to help people. It's not some commodity. It's not a cheeseburger. It's not a can of beer. It's a medicine. And we always come back to the why. And even more so what it represents in this world: freedom, equality, community. Can we build that into the brand? And that shit takes a lot of time. Sorry for swearing. And I'm so grateful that we built a team that appreciates the plant and sees the plant for what it is. And we try to promote that from our seat at the table. We're not a manufacturer, we're not a retailer, but we build software for those folks. How do we build it in a way that it allows them to showcase the plant in truth and allow the consumers to digest this information in truth? And that's all we're trying to do.
In 2016 and maybe a little bit before, what were those early days like in terms of forming the team and working together to kind of try and figure out how you take this idea and bring it to market?
Are you a parent, David?
I'm a new parent. Yeah, I have a 3 and a 5-year-old.
3 and a 5-year-old, right? I'm not a parent. So I already realize I'm speaking from a place of ignorance, but maybe this will resonate. You know, you and your partner raising your 2 children is hard. There's no roadmap. There's no manual. There's no playbook. Like people will tell you, and you like read stuff on my sister, who also works at the company, is Marcelo's our nephew, 1 year old plus. And I watch her and her husband raise this child. And there's a lot of like in the back of your mind, you're like, am I making a mistake? Am I doing something wrong? Why is this not working? Or it worked for this person? And what I realized in watching kind of raising a child is the same way you kind of raise a business. And you always have to come back to, I'm on this theme lately, to the truth. And the truth is like, okay, if you feed your baby this at this time and you sleep train at that time, like, okay, that's one level. But deep down, do you and your partner, A, love each other? And 2, does your love for each other create the space for these beings to grow in truth? That is the most important thing. And you see a lot of companies that get formed and they're doing it because they want to make money, or they're doing it because they want to get famous, or they're doing it because whatever, fill in the blank. But if you can do it and not forget about this creation, and to create a safe space for this creation to grow however it's going to grow. Who knows how your children, what beautiful things they're going to grow into. You have no idea, right? No idea. But like, as long as they're growing in truth, that's what it's meant to be. And I'm so grateful that we have a founding team that did that we all agreed to that. Like, hey, we're doing this to create this safe space for this thing, Jane, to grow in truth. And that's what we talk about at Jane a lot, is what is Jane? A lot of people say it's a software company. We say it's a space. We're creating a space for people to create in truth, in love, for the right intentions. And what comes out of that, I have no idea. Investors hate that. I'll fake it and say, oh, yeah, I think we're going this way. But really, deep down, I have no idea. And what I do know and what we can control is the input, not the output, but the input. And if the input is love and respect and kindness and patience, then and we can hold that. And sometimes it's easy to say now, man. It's hard to do when you're up at 2 a.m. in the morning, you haven't slept, right? And just like got all their stresses in the world. Man, starting a business is no different. But can you have the discipline to hold that love and not forget the why? If you can do that, it sounds so cliche, but the rest takes care of itself. You got to like make sure you don't run out of money, and you got to feed your baby and like do all that stuff. But the underlying stuff is the most important. I think a lot of, and I'm not speaking as any expert, because who am I? But I think that's at least what I do know is, like, if you can put the input, if the inputs are true, the outputs will be true. If the inputs are not true, it's going to catch up to you at some point. At some point, maybe you'll make money, maybe you'll get famous, but at some point it won't be true. It won't be in its truest form. And that's what we're trying to do with Jane, is allow this thing to be like, okay, what is this thing going to be? Can we keep protecting this and build it in love?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I definitely, you mentioned that aha moment you had as a consultant when you're in the room with the other CEOs and you realize, oh, these are just humans. And I think that as a parent, you have that aha moment too, where you're reaching out to other parents, trying to think, like, glean off their expertise. And then you have the same aha moment where you're like, oh, we're all just figuring this out as we go. And I think you're right in terms of the base of, like, all you know is that you can provide a best path forward for your kids or your business, doing what you know to be right and genuine. And I think that also makes, when you're talking about the, feedings or working at 2 a.m., you know that what you believe in your heart to be true, and that's the path you're going. So it makes it easier in a way.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, it's weird to use that word easy, right? Because it doesn't feel easy. But if you were to complicate yourself, like if you're having kids for the wrong reasons, you're starting a company for the wrong reasons, shit's already really hard. Mm-hmm. Like, to pile on that and have to like contort yourself to hold that untruth up, yeah, that's really hard. And I've done that in my life, and I don't want to do that anymore. I want to feel light and true. And I'm not tied to the outcome at that point. Like, you're not like, oh man, I hope my 5-year-old turns into a doctor. That's why I had kids, man, so I can get a pat on the back from everyone, and I'm a good parent. It's like, nah, man, I just want to love this thing, and wherever this creature grows into, like, as long as that's true, and this entity can go on and be its own living thing that could potentially do good in this world, that's how we feel about Jane. Mm-hmm. Like, one day I want to set this thing free, however that means. And can it continue to do good in this world? Man, that we birthed, we created something beautiful. And that's the power I think we have as human beings. And we have the power to go the other way too. We can create a lot of disruption too if we allow ourselves to do that. If we forget the truth. And you see a lot of companies doing that, right? They deceive their employees, they deceive their customers. Why? To make money. Okay, well, that's not the purpose of starting a company. In my opinion, the purpose of starting a company is providing value. Money to a company is like blood in the human body. It allows you to be, but that shouldn't be your purpose for being.
So how was Jane founded, and how has it evolved over the last 6-7 years into the company it is today?
Yeah. So we started the company. We launched on 4/20 of 2017. We got a whopping 0 orders on the first day of launches. It was one of those moments. We 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 built for the consumer first. Back in the day, we were like, oh man, consumer wants the ability to search for a certain terpene or strain and get recommendations and read reviews and compare by price. And that is very, very true. But that's half of the equation, right? Jeff Bezos talks about you start with the consumer and you work your way back. That's all we care about is consumer, consumer, consumer. But look at the effect of that. Right? He whittles down all the sellers to the point where Amazon's the only seller of their products at this point. And I'm not saying that's good or bad, but what we saw was an opportunity. Actually, if we were going to build an industry, if we're going to help provide a digital infrastructure for this industry to grow, we couldn't just focus on the consumer. In fact, the consumer had to take a back seat to us building digital infrastructure for the retailers and the brands. And that's where our focus, I think like 6 months in, David, we had a real shift. We were like, man, we could go chase consumers all day, but what's the point of that if we're not setting our retailers and our brands up for success? And the way we know how to do that is to build them software that helps drive efficiencies, that helps introduce them to data that they would otherwise not have, to educate them on how to advertise properly and to understand attribution. And that's how we build an industry. We help enable the builders of the industry, or actually the operators. Software, man, we're a second act. We should be in support of these operators. And that was a real aha moment for us. And that took the company in a direction now where we, support 3,000 operators, and we have an e-commerce business, a point of sale business, an analytics business, advertising. And we're just starting now back to kind of bring the consumers back into the equation now that we have the proper infrastructure and can bring, hopefully mainstream consumers into their local retailers and brands. And that's ultimately the goal. So that was a big shift for us. And I'm glad we made that shift early on.
How many operators, or were you working with operators at the beginning to see what they were looking for as you were building it?
Oh, yeah, my God. Shout out Higher Level of Care in Castroville, California, the artichoke capital of the world, just south of Santa Cruz. One little store in the back of a smoke shop. Remember the manager there, I'm not going to share their names, but was a Navy veteran. And I remember he looked at me when we were pitching the business. We had nothing, a backpack and a laptop. And he's like, all right, man, I'll give you a shot. And that was really, man, I'm so grateful for that moment, because we got to really now be welcomed into the industry, and we got to see what budtenders had to go through, what inventory managers had to go through, what owners had to go through. And we developed a sense of empathy and compassion. And that was kind of rooted into our software and why we built it. But yeah, first year, we were just focused on Santa Cruz, a little bit of Denver. And those early operators really, forever grateful for them, because they brought us into the industry. We were outside looking in, and now we got a real intimate view on what they were struggling with. And because of that, because we got to understand their problems intimately, we could find solutions. And man, for any like entrepreneur getting started, those early customers, that's pure gold. And protect that and value that and take care of that and serve that, because they're going to show you the answer. They're going to show you the way.
So what are the solutions that you built, and how do they serve the cannabis industry?
Many different offerings across in-store infrastructure and advertising, e-commerce. We support brands, we support retailers. I would argue that our biggest contribution to the industry and what allows us to spin up different business lines is that early on, MIT actually was a pleasant surprise. They wrote a case study in our business, which is a trip to think about that. Like, there's a business case about Jane. And I was talking to the professor, Scott Stern, who was writing the case, and he's like, and I thought that, oh, you're writing the case because we're former students and we have this cool software and we got a patent. And now we have, I think, a dozen patents. And I was like, it's our software. And he's like, it's actually not your software that I'm interested in. What I'm really interested in is the opportunity you have in this point in time, where as a tech company, you have the chance to organize an entire industry's worth of information before Google, before Amazon. And that was like, oh. And I remember him looking at me specifically. He was like, hey, man, I hope you understand what you have. Don't mess this up. And we doubled down on our commitment to creating the universal product catalog, the UPC, for this industry. We have about 2 million SKUs. And what that pragmatically means, David, is like a pomegranate wild gummy can be sold at multiple different retailers. And the way they're going to name it in their point of sale system is going to be different. Someone might spell wild without the Y and the I. Someone might just put W as an abbreviation. Someone might spell pomegranate wrong. Someone might not have a photo. Another store doesn't have a description. So here's a single product can be represented in thousands of different ways. Well, what we've done now, and this is Abe's brilliance, is the ability to take those different data points and through inference models, be able to say, it's actually this product, put the right photo, the right description, the right product reviews, all the taxonomy. And now what you can do is you can push that product to different points across the internet. We now push it to Leafly. We'll push it to Weedmaps here soon. One day that's Uber. One day that's maybe Google itself. We can take this SKU, we can push it to our own marketplace, iHeartGene.com, our app. We could push it into an embedded menu for the store. When you advertise against the SKU, now Wild can go and sponsor this product to the top of the menus because they know David loves wild gummies and they want to convert him. In terms of our data, we can tell brands exactly who purchased the SKU, not who, but the kinds of people purchasing the SKU. What else do they purchase? How often do they come back? This is what we call the truth. And we have the truth. And now can we go and manipulate the truth or take the ingredients of the truth and spin up a point of sale business, spin up an e-commerce business. And that's what we've done. So I would say that was the biggest decision we made as a company. And that was back in 2016, 2017. And it was the most important because, in the game of business, we have competitors. Competitors want to also build a point of sale. They also want to build an advertising business, an e-commerce business. But without the catalog, it can't do the same things that we can do. Mm-hmm. And in order for them, our competitors, to kind of get on parity, not only would they have to build 2 million SKUs into their catalog, but they would have to, through years, train models to understand the different permutations of a single SKU. And I would argue that ship has sailed. And so for us now, we're in like clear waters, clean waters. What else can we build? And I would argue that there's a lot of potential out there beyond what we're just doing now.
You launched Jane Point of Sale in June of this year, I believe.
Yeah.
How has the launch gone, and what has been the industry response?
Well, shout out to all the point of sale operators out there. This is not an easy business. E-com is no hardware. Spin something up. Man, you talk about point of sale. You're like, gotta have terminals and payments, and you're in the store. What the point of sale is now served as is like, it is the centralized hub for all things in the dispensary, wholesale to the customer. And so the launch for us, we've launched this in about 6 months, which a lot of companies take about 2.5 years to start up. So we brought folks from Square, designers, product managers to come in, and we've been like heads down on this thing, and this team has been incredible. And we have about, I would say 50, 60 retailers now using our platform. We have intentionally been disciplined with how we roll this out, because like in SaaS, you don't want to go too fast. So we're hitting our milestones and receiving feedback from the market. There are some very exciting things we have in the work. The next big unlock for us is really taking our catalog and pushing it into the point of sale, which allows for the bud tenders to understand the consumer on a much more intimate level, to allow for a much more personalized experience for the consumer, to unify a data set. So it's been the most challenging business line we've launched, and also the most satisfying. It reminds me early on of the days at Jane where we're literally inside the store, understanding how these retailers work and uncovering and surfacing a lot of pain points. And, you know, as software engineers, a software company, we could fix a lot of those pain points. So it's really exciting. It has taken longer than I had initially planned. And that is consistent with every launch we've ever done, David. So hopefully that's good luck, but we feel very good. And we're just getting started.
Regarding some of the other categories you're in, is point of sale the most competitive?
Yeah. Yes, it is. You have a lot of legacy point of sale operators. I mean, switching a point of sale is complicated. Just the switching costs are high, right? You've got hardware in there. You trained your staff on that. It has all the data. So to switch point of sales is tricky. I don't see a lot of point of sale companies scaling from where they were. It's kind of like stagnant. So that'll be interesting to continue to monitor over the next couple of years. But yeah, if you think about e-commerce, you know, it used to be competitive. Now it's boiled down to like 2 or 3 players. Advertising, you know, you got Weed Maps, you got Leafly, you got Jane, for the most part. But point of sale, man, you got like a dozen out there that are relatively stable. And it's like kind of like a stalemate right now and who can move. And so you need something very differentiated in order to be able to kind of replace an existing point of sale. And I would argue that Jane is probably the best position for that, given our catalog and the other things that we have provided and brought to market. And so by no means do we think this is going to be an easy task of inserting our point of sale. But I like the foundation that we've built over the past few years. And, you know, we're going to roll this out in a smart way.
So of the 2,500 dispensaries in 39 different markets, who are your power users? Who's using it the best?
In terms of retailers?
In terms of any of your customers that are using Jane to its fullest capabilities?
Yeah, I think there's kind of three sets of stakeholders. There's the brand, the retailer, and the consumer. I think for the retailer, you know, it's the ones that understand how to use the full suite of our services. So we have, for instance, digital merchandising, where we allow the shelves to move up and down and curate based on who's looking at your menu. If a store opts in on that, they get a cut of the advertising dollars that the brand spends at their store. A lot of stores don't understand the concept of that, but that's like free money. You can use that free money then to get off menu, what we call off menu, but to bring new customers into your store. And the way we are very confident about that is we have the source of truth. We could tell you like, hey, you spent this much money to acquire these users. This is what these users did. They purchased, they didn't. Using our e-commerce paired with our point of sale in our kiosk is, I think, really, really valuable, because you can connect the user experience from the time they're looking online to the time they get into your store and they check out. So I think those are the best kinds of retailers. The brands understand, it's a little bit more straightforward, where the brands that understand attribution and ROI with respect to advertising, man, those brands you're starting to see a real separation in terms of successful brands and brands that don't get that, which is consistent with every other CPG vertical out there. Mm-hmm. And then I think for the consumers, the ones that use this best, we just rolled out this very quiet alpha program called Jane Gold, where if you have a favorite brand, like Wild, for instance, I like Aaron, their CEO, so I'll give him some shine. You love Wild. Well, now, you know how you used to be able to go to a store and you'd be like, oh, my favorite local store is carrying Wild and it's buy one, get one or 10% off. But you'd have to go to that specific store. Well, now Wild is basically using Jane as the broker for those deals. And they'll be able to message you, David, and say, hey, David, we know you love Wild. Shop at any available store on the Jane network, and we'll give you cash back on your purchase. So maybe more to follow on that in the next few months as that's building and showing some very good signs. But at the end of the day, all we're trying to do is create these win-win opportunities for the store, for the brand, for the customer. And the ones that understand how to use the full suite of our services is getting the most out of it. Pretty straightforward.
I mean, what are your opinions on some of the growth strategies that brands and other operators can use, particularly in a cannabis industry that right now, at least when it comes to mainstream media, it kind of seems a little stagnant?
Yeah, I use the challenge as the opportunity. Spending a lot of money on Google is one thing, but if you don't have attribution, what I mean by attribution is if you buy an AdWord on Google and you buy the word cannabis, and someone searches for cannabis and your dispensary comes up, well, all Google will be able to tell you is, hey, we showed this ad to this consumer and they clicked on it, and you pay Google some money. But you have no idea if that person clicked on it by accident. You have no idea if the person clicked on it and then exited out. What we can tell you, though, is that person clicked on your advertisement, went into your menu, looked at these products, put these products in the cart, purchased this product, came back 2 weeks later, purchased another product. That's the level of attribution that we can provide. So like everybody's like, oh man, we can advertise on Twitter now. Well, same applies. Like, cool, you're going to buy some advertising dollars on Twitter. Then what? Oh, Twitter's going to tell you they showed your ad to 1 million people and 100,000 people clicked. Okay, but what happened to those 100,000 people? And that's where the gap is. So the beautiful part about being in this industry, because this country makes it very hard for us to succeed, is that we're going to innovate. And now we have capabilities, and not just Jane, there are other companies out there, I would argue not as good as Jane, but we can provide a level of attribution that no other brand in any other retail vertical will be able to get first party. You'd have to buy credit card information and all these different weird things and hire data scientists to connect the dots. Well, now we can just serve that up in a really easy, digestible way. And I almost welcome one day for Facebook and Google to open up their ads, because I'm curious to see do brands gravitate towards that, or do they stick with Jane because we can give them a level of attribution that would otherwise not be attainable on any other platform. So I think the challenge creates the opportunity. It's been hard to piece that together, but we have it now. And I think the industry, if you talk to some of the top 50 brands out there advertising, I would find it very difficult to find a brand that isn't extremely satisfied with our advertising program, because it's not like we're doing anything crazy. We're giving them the truth. And for brands that can't sell direct to consumer, it's hard to access the truth.
Well, and when it comes to truth and social media ad reporting numbers, just based on experience, I wouldn't necessarily call them truthful.
Yeah, you got it, man. It's a lot of hand wavy stuff. We saw that, right? And I'm not going to call any names out, but that's happening in this industry, where it's like, I gave you guys $50,000 this month. And they're like, oh man, you got 700,000 impressions. That's so good.
Yeah.
A, can I validate that? No. And B, so what? What does that mean for my bottom line? And that's what these brands and these retailers need in order to survive in a market that's very hard, where there's so many headwinds. Now let's give them the truth. And because we created this catalog, because we worked hard at opening up this network and had this maniacal obsession with cleansed data, well, now the truth is available for everyone. And that's how you build an industry for generations to come.
I wanted to talk a little bit about data in particular, because I have a background in manufacturing, a company that kind of embraced big data, and then it all came in and they had no idea how to use it or, harness it for its full ability. But it looks like, or it sounds to me like, Jane really understands the importance of big data and then makes it digestible, so that way customers can actually make actionable plans.
Exactly. There's a very big difference between data and insights. Data is like raw material. Like, cool, here's all this data. But what can you take these data points and create insights for the consumer? Can we say, hey, like Amazon did this 15 years ago. If you buy this, 90% of people who looked at this also bought that. Right? This is the number 14 out of 200 nonfiction science books out there. Like, okay, as a consumer, that's powerful for me because you're instilling confidence in the purchase. And now for the brands and the stores, now they're driving conversion a lot more, because when you have a confident consumer, they're going to purchase something. If they feel duped or confused, they're not going to purchase. Mm-hmm. And so for us, data is the raw ingredients. The insights is the meal that we cook up. And it's not just insights for the consumer, by the way. It's insights that we provide at the fingertips for our retail partners and our brand partners as well. Hey, these are products that are selling really well. Or, hey, you're pricing these products way too high. You can actually lower them and drive higher conversion. Or you're pricing these products way too low. You should increase the price a little bit and maximize your ROI. That's what we're able to provide. And again, once you can establish, if everybody's operating on the truth, you have a balanced, healthy ecosystem. When one party has the truth and no one else does, a la DoorDash, right? DoorDash has all the truth, the restaurants don't. Mm-hmm. What's happening? DoorDash is making millions. Mm-hmm. Restaurants are suffering. Okay, can we take the truth and be stewards of the truth, not controllers of the truth? That's really what we're trying to do here.
Are these insights programmatic, or is there any sort of consultative touch between Jane and the customer?
We are in education mode in this industry. Mm-hmm. I have very few experts out there, but we're educating, right? Like 10 years ago, you had a listing on Weed Maps and you were like, cool, I'm good. Now we're educating to say there's probably more you can do out there. And at the end of the day, software is nothing without the human beings behind that. And our mission all along has been to enable and empower our brand and retail partners. In order for us to do that, we sit down on for some stores, a weekly basis, monthly, quarterly, and we take all the data. We have our quarterly business reviews with every single brand and retailer. And we sit down and we're like, okay, here's your data. Here are the insights. Here's what we recommend. And it's a conversation and a consultation. And it's in the spirit of not trying to sell them more, but obviously we would like to, because we're proving our worth. But really, it's in the spirit of enabling and empowering these retailers and brands, because those are the ones building the industry. And if they're not building the industry with a full set of and understanding of truth, then we're limiting not only them, but we're limiting this industry and this plant as a whole.
You talk about building Jane and then eventually possibly getting to the point where you're setting it free. Is that part of the end game, as to possibly trying to put it in somebody else's hands? And in the event, how do you prevent it becoming DoorDash if that happens?
Yeah. I knew you were going to ask me that when I said that. We're just going to frustrate my investors, but I'm really not focused on, like, yes, you could go IPO, you could sell. We are not in that mode at all until, number one, that this business has a profitable model. Because if you're not profitable, you have to play other people's game. Amazon doesn't play anybody else's game. And I'm not saying Amazon is just like insane company to be replicated, but they played the game very well. Salesforce, Apple, Netflix, they're not really playing anybody's game because they're extremely profitable businesses. You see a lot of copycats that aren't profitable, and they make some decisions that are short-sighted or short-term thinking because they have to get to the money. So we're focused on building a very sustainable, profitable business. That's hard to do in this space, by the way. So that's our first piece. Okay, can we do we have to sell? Do we have to IPO? Or can we just build our own destiny here? That's our number one focus. Number two, and equally as important, if not more, is the culture strong? Do we have is there a real identity of Jane here? Do we know who we are? right? When I was 18 and went to West Point, I had no idea who I was. I probably shouldn't have left the house, right? I probably should have taken some more time to know who I am before I step out into this world. I know you're probably thinking about that with your 2 children. So that's number 2. And number 3, is the product stable? Is it built the right way? Can we go from 10 million users to 100 million to 1 billion and have it not break down? Those are kind of the three things in my mind. And so that's, again, in the spirit of focusing on the input, that's what we're focused on. The results of an IPO, an acquisition, whatever that is, legalization and 2024, rescheduling in 2025, who knows? But we're on a mission to be in charge of our own destiny. And those are the 3 ways, in our opinion, that we do that. And then if someone comes knocking, I think then we get to decide. We don't want to have to make the decision. We get to decide to be like, yeah, this is a great home for Jane, or man, we're going to IPO this and build a very big company. And I don't know where we're going to go. And I probably won't, man, until the time comes, which is crazy to say out loud, but it's the truth.
As you were building Jane, did you always think it would be a family affair?
Wow. I don't have many friends. So that question's probably, best suited for Abe, of why he stuck around, and Al, my sister. I will say though that the love and respect and trust that we have for one another has set the tone for how we treat our teammates and how our teammates treat each other. And I'm grateful that it was founded in love and respect and truth, and because we were brothers and sisters. And I think that's extended all the way down to every single employee. So I'm grateful for it. And yeah, my mom's proud. She's proud.
That was going to be my next question, is, from the one son joining the army to find himself chastising the other for smoking weed. What does mom think of where you guys have come now?
She's from Indonesia, so in Southeast Asia, it's not very chill to be caught with cannabis. It's like a bad thing. And so at first she was really nervous. She's like, "What, are you a drug dealer? What are you doing?" And when I shared with her my experience with the plant and the why we're doing what we're doing, not only has she accepted that, but she's now our number 1 fan. And yeah, if you're on our Instagram account, you'll see her all the time commenting, and she's probably commenting right now somewhere about this podcast. But as long as it's true, and you're doing it for the right reasons, and that's to help people, then everything's okay. And that's the way I was raised, and I'm grateful to have a mother who taught me that.
Well, Socrates, thank you very much for sharing your story and your insight about the industry. Before we get out of here, though, is there anything else that you want to make sure the Cannabis Equipment News audience, our viewers and listeners, know either about yourself or your company?
Man, I just one of the best conversations I've had, David. So I appreciate this. You can tell that you've started stuff from 0 to 1, that you care about the plant. So I appreciate it, man. I think we've covered everything. I think it's going to get crazy. This industry is crazy. And it's going to get crazier over the next few years. And it looks like there's going to be some changes in DC about this. And I don't know how that's going to, go one way or the other. I'm not here to speculate, but what I hope we all as an industry can remember is the why and what this plant does for this planet and this people. And if we can hold on to that truth, we'll be all right. If we let go of that truth and chase other truths, or lies, I should say, I don't think we'll be all right. And that's our commitment at Jane, is to make sure that we're true, and we honor the plant, and we honor the people who consume the plant. We honor the people that have taken the risk to sell this plant and do it the right way. And I'm excited for the future. I really am.
Well, thank you for the work you're doing, and I look forward to see what's coming next.
Thanks so much, David.
All right. Well, before we get out of here, please make sure to like, share, and subscribe to the podcast. You could also help us out a lot by leaving the podcast a positive review on whatever platform you use. If you want to email the podcast, you can reach me at David@Cannabis Equipment News with email the podcast in the subject line. You can also subscribe to our daily newsletter. Make sure you get it delivered to your inbox first. For Socrates Rosenfeld, CEO and co-founder of Jane Technologies, I'm David Manti. This is the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast. We'll see you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Cannabis Equipment News Podcast.